A Place Called Perfect, Chapter 29. Little Helpers. William wrapped his arms around his old friend. "Who's that?" Violet whispered. "Merrill Marks, the toy maker," Boy smiled. "He has the nicest shop in No Man's Land. Gives free stuff to the orphans." Violet liked the sound of him already, but there were still only 4 of them. They needed an army large enough to overthrow the archers and their watchers, if they were to save Perfect and her dad. "If we could just prove to the No Man's Landers that they can be reunited with their families, then I know they'll join us and fight," William said. "But how?" Merrill asked. "It sounds great, but it's just a dream, William." "We use the Reimaginator. We give the perfectionists back their imaginations and show the No Man's Landers. Then they'll revolt in here. I know it will work." "But that's still not enough people to overthrow the might of the Watchers, William," Merrill said quietly. "The rebellions in the past showed us that much." "Yes, but it won't be just us. We need to stage an uprising here, and while the Watchers are dealing with that, we'll sneak into Perfect and change the perfectionists. Then we'll have numbers large enough to take back our town." "But to use your machine, we need people's imaginations so we can give them back," Violet said. "How do we get them from the archers without being spotted?" Boy, who'd been sitting quietly by the window, suddenly stood up. "I know where we can get an army. They might be a little small, but they'll have lots of energy," he smiled. "They'll help us get the imaginations." "Who are you talking about, boy?" William asked. "The orphans, my family." "No," William and Merrill both shook their heads. "They're only children, boy," Merrill said, looking straight at him. "It's too dangerous," William added. "We're kids, too, if you haven't noticed," Violet said, stepping forward, her hands on her hips. "Don't underestimate them," Boy smiled. "These kids have grown up on the streets of No Man's Land. They're much braver than any adults I know." "OK, so what's your plan?" Violet asked, ignoring the 2 older men. "Well, we need lots of hands to get the imaginations. The orphans are light on their feet, quick and nimble. We could start with, say, 20 imaginations. Would that be enough to convince the No Man's Landers that our plan will work?" Boy asked. William nodded slowly. "Yes, I think so. If we could change 20 perfectionists and bring them back here, nobody could dispute our plan." "Brilliant! So we get 20 orphans. We cross the river. The bridge shouldn't be too risky as they're all small and light. Sneak through the ghost estate at night when the Watchers who look after the eye plants are sleeping. Into the graveyard, through the tunnel to the archer's storeroom. Then we grab the imaginations and bring them back here." "But what about the hollowing team?" Violet asked. "They might be in their den." "If we time it right, they should be out on patrol." "It sounds very risky, boy," William said. "Yes, but if it works, the orphans get to go home. I live in the orphanage. I hear them crying all the time. Most of them still dream of their old lives, only to wake up here in No Man's Land. That's why I went looking for Violet's dad in the first place. I thought he might be able to help get their families back. I think they'll be willing to take the risk." "OK, if you're sure, boy. You put across a convincing case," William said, looking at Merrill and Violet. "What do you 2 think?" "I think kids are way smarter than adults anyway," Violet smiled. "Well, that's a yes, I take it, Violet," Merrill joked. "I'm in too. I understand what Boy's saying about the orphans. They come to my shop most days and play, just so they can be kids again. As long as they're happy to go, then I won't stop them. The Archers can't have any idea we're after the imaginations. If they get a whiff that something's up, we're finished, William said, looking sternly at Boy. They won't, Boy said solidly. 20 missing imaginations won't be noticed among all the other jars on the shelf. And we'll go back the back way, through the ghost estate. No one will have a clue we've been to the storeroom at all. Like I said, we orphans are used to sneaking around unseen. The foursome discussed their plans until Boy and Violet couldn't hold their eyes open any longer. William insisted they should sleep while he and Merrill worked on the reimaginator. It was almost dusk. The sun was setting behind the high stone walls of No Man's Land when William gently prodded the two children from their slumber to reveal a humming machine. I knew it'd only need a tweak, he said proudly, polishing the brass. Now, all we need are a few imaginations. We're going to sort that out now, Boy smiled. The orphans should be getting up soon. Are you sure this plan will work? Merrill asked. Of course, Violet replied. Nothing's ever difficult for children. It's adults who complicate things. You remember the meeting point, William? Boy interrupted. Don't worry, Boy. We'll be waiting by the rag tree with this old girl. Boy and Violet said goodbye to their friends and, for the second time in as many days, left William Archer's house on a mission. Violet followed Boy, predicting every turn they took. No Man's Land was no longer a mystery to her. They snuck onto Forgotten Road and along to the orphanage. Boy took the key from under the bird bath and jiggled it in the lock. Moments later they were standing in the enormous hall. This way, he whispered, tiptoeing across the tiled floor. The place was quiet and sounds echoed through the empty halls like ghosts. Fear crawled up Violet's spine. They reached the wooden stairwell and climbed 2 floors, the steps creaking under their weight, then walked down another corridor to a set of wooden double doors. Be really quiet, Boy mouthed, pushing one open. He slipped through the narrow gap, Violet in tow. Stay here, he whispered, leaving her side. Shards of late evening light came through the shuttered windows, and she could see the rusted metal frame of a bunk bed beside her. A small, thin figure moved beneath a threadbare blanket in the bottom bunk. There were at least 20 other bunks in this oversized room, all occupied by similar small figures. The air was cold and wisps of foggy breath formed in the front of her nose. Moans and groans followed Boy round the room like a chorus as he quietly made his way from bed to bed, pulling each child gently from their sleep. When he finally got back to Violet, the room was humming. Is it time to get up already? A small voice complained. Shh! Yes, it's almost night time, Boy whispered. And I have a favour to ask. Please don't make a sound or the nurses will come rushing down here, and we all know what happens then. Shushes and giggles danced round the room. Right, I'm going to turn on the light now, Boy warned. Not a sound. There was a faint flicker from above, then another that lasted a little longer, and finally the light came to life. 20 miniature messy-haired heads peered out from under dirty sheets. What is it, Boy? A little girl in one of the upper bunks asked, grabbing the rusted white railing that ran round the edge of her bed. Is it Santy? No, Anna, Boy smiled. It's not Santa. I have a job that I want you to help me with. If it works, you'll go back home to your family. Just me? Anna asked. No, everybody, Boy replied. Really? We'll really go home? A child a little younger than Boy said, jumping up on his mattress. Like home, Boy? You're not joking, are you? No, I'm not joking. You'll go back to your real home and family, I promise. Well then I'm in. I don't care what I have to do. You can come live in my house, boy, Anna said, 'cause you don't have a family of your own. Thanks, Boy smiled, lifting the little girl into his arms. Now, listen. I want you all to think about this really hard, 'cause it's gonna be dangerous. Whoa, danger! Another little boy laughed and did a somersault on his bed. What sort of danger? An older orphan asked. The Archer twins have stolen the imaginations of the people in Perfect, Jack, and we need to get them back so they'll remember us. I knew it. I knew the Archers were evil, a little boy said. I wrote a story about it in school, then the Watchers came and took me off. Yes, you're different, you see, just like the rest of us. That's why the Watchers put you here. They couldn't steal your imagination. But what can we do, boy? Anna asked. The Archers are keeping the jars of imaginations in a secret storeroom behind their shop. We can get to it through a tunnel in the ghost estate. We take a jar each and bring it back here. It sounds simple, but I want you all to know it could be very dangerous. Does that mean we have to cross the river? A little girl said, sitting upright. But it's haunted over there. I've heard all the stories. If we go, we'll be killed. I'm not sure about ghosts, Boy replied, but there are Watchers in the ghost estate. That's why I want you all to think hard about this mission. Like I said, it is dangerous, and if you don't want to come, you don't have to. But it's an adventure, another child piped up. Yeah, loads of voices joined in. An adventure! Each child was as excited as the next, and it took a lot of shushing to calm them down as Violet and Boy outlined the details of their plan. By 10 o'clock that night, everyone was fully briefed, dressed and ready to go. I really hope this works, Boy, Violet whispered. It will, he said confidently. Boy, she continued as she helped the little girl put on her jumper, you know, once this is over, you can come and live in my house if you like. Thanks, Violet, he smiled. A few minutes later, with the room ready, lights off and shutters open, Boy addressed the crowd. Leave the orphanage just as you would on a normal night, he said. Don't act strange if the nurses stop you. Myself and Violet will wait just round the corner. Boy and Violet left first and waited by the side of the orphanage for their 20 recruits. Then they split into 4 groups. 2 of the older orphans were appointed as leaders alongside Boy and Violet. Boy's group would go first, with Violet's taking up the rear. We'll meet at the bridge into the ghost estate. You all know how to get there, Boy addressed the throng in a whisper. Everyone nodded. The orphans knew No Man's Land better than anyone. The groups left one at a time until it was Violet's group's turn. The coast was clear. She beckoned her orphans forward and they headed down Forgotten Road and then took the next left into a lane. An odd atmosphere was settling over the streets. Violet shivered. She tried to shake off the worry as her pack raced past the market yard. Only a few stalls had set up and the market was much quieter than usual. They stuck to the walls, travelling in the shadows as much as possible. The others, now well ahead, were nowhere to be seen. She hoped they would wait at the bridge as planned. We need to move faster, she whispered to the orphans. They picked up the pace and were now jogging towards the river down Wickham Terrace. Violet could almost hear the waters ahead. They just about reached the river when a loud smack filled the street, followed by a high-pitched squeal. She pushed me, a little girl roared, holding her arm. I hit my elbow. Shh, Anna, whispered Violet, rushing back to the girl's side. You have to be quiet. But my elbow is sore, she cried, tears streaming down her face. Please stop crying, Violet insisted, scanning the street. "Oi! Who goes there?" a gravelly voice shouted. Heavy footsteps approached from behind. Violet grabbed Anna's hand and the shawl that was wrapped around her shoulders. She pulled the shawl round her own head and whispered to the others to hide in the doorway. "You have to be brave and you have to agree with everything I say, understand?" Anna nodded, clinging to Violet as more tears streamed down her face. "What are you two doing out here?" a voice snarled. "It was my sister," Violet replied, turning slowly round. A watcher stood close by in the shadows. I can see that, but it doesn't answer my question, little girl." "We're going to the market," Violet stuttered, pulling the shawl tighter round her face. "The market's the other way." "We got lost." "Where do you live?" the watcher asked, moving closer. Violet's heart stopped. What were the streets' names in no man's land? Her cheeks burned. Her mind was blank. She couldn't think. "More Lane!" Anna sobbed. Violet gasped and squeezed her hand. The watcher looked from one to the other without uttering a word. "Well, you'd better be getting back there then," he said, eventually breaking the silence. "Haven't you heard no one is to leave their homes in no man's land tonight?" "No, I'm sorry, we didn't know, sir," Violet stuttered. "We'll go now. It won't happen again, I promise." Slipping past the watcher's solid frame, Violet's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Oi!" he called as they neared the market's yard. Violet stiffened. Running away would only make things worse. Slowly she turned on the spot. "You sure you know where you're going this time?" "Yes," she answered, almost whispering. "Moor Lane is that way," he said, pointing. "Oh, thanks," she replied quickly, following his instructions. The watchers stood on the spot until they had rounded the corner. They kept their heads down and walked quickly, hoping he wouldn't follow them. After a few minutes, when they were sure they were in the clear, Violet loosened her grip on the girl's hand and stopped, crouching down so they were face to face. She let out a long, slow breath. "I'm sorry, Violet," Anna sobbed, throwing her arms around her neck. "I didn't mean to get us into trouble." "You didn't," Violet whispered. "You saved us." The pair waited for a while longer in the shadows before doubling back to the rest of the group still huddled in the doorway to resume their journey. By the time they reached the river, the others had gone. Violet searched the banks, but there was no sign of any groups. They decided to cross anyway, sure everyone else must be ahead of them. Violet climbed onto the footbridge, gripped the wire ropes and showed the orphans how to jump from plank to plank, as Boy had shown her. Her legs wobbled, but she did her best to hide her nerves. When she'd reached the other side, the orphans were on her heels, fearless. Once on dry land, they ran through the grass onto the tarmac road to the pillars of the ghost estate. There was still no sign of the other groups, and Violet's pulse raced. Maybe they'd gone ahead. She remembered the watcher and what he'd said about nobody being allowed to leave their homes. Maybe they'd all been caught. Her mind was spinning when something moved just inside the entrance. "Hide, now!" she whispered to her group. Not making a sound, she approached the cement pillars, her heart pounding. She'd just passed by the billboard of the Happy Family when a figure rushed at her from the darkness. And that's the end of chapter 29.